This could decide the game.
4th and goal. They're going to snap it, and it's Trey Burton who throws caught. Foles, touchdown.
Inability as well. Turnover though by Boston. Now Simmons in transition. What a pass to Hembo! My goodness! Posterizes Baines and the foul.
The 0-2 pitch. Swing and a miss. Struck him out. The Philadelphia Phillies are 2008 World Champions.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Phaithful Phanatics show. As always, I am your host, Dylan Davis, and today I am joined by two very special guests. One of my guys here at DSM Media, JD. Please give him a follow on Twitter at JDOracle_DDS. He's the man who comes up with all these great promos, intro videos, graphics, and everything like that. And Sneaky Hembo joins us once again on the Phaithful Phanatics show, guys. Paul Hembekides from ESPN's Get Up. You can give him a follow on Twitter if you haven't already at Paul Hembo. Hembo, man, thank you for coming on again.
Gentlemen, it's good to be here. You guys do a good show, and I feel like I've not done my job. I would have come on with like a whole host of trivia questions for you and stumped you off the bat and soured the mood right away. But maybe I'll kick it back to the end of the show so you guys don't sour on me.
Yeah, you'll have to come up with something for JD, man. But listen, let's get right into it because you are, from the area, you are a Philadelphia sports fan, so it's good to have you on and kind of get some of that fandom back going here. But normally at the end of July, there's not much going on outside of baseball. But right now, the Eagles are making moves. Training camp's a few short days away. The Sixers are going to have a crazy offseason, it looks like. The Phillies at the trade deadline are being very aggressive. And hell, even the Flyers have had one hell of a week and a half in the trade market. So let's start with the Eagles because training camp is just a few short days away. I just want to get your thoughts on the latest signing in Steven Nelson, man. Like, what are your thoughts on the addition of him? And can one guy really change a secondary? Because in my eyes, not only did the Eagles and Howie Roseman solve the cornerback number 2, dilemma, you solved a handful of other issues with this one piece. And now that Avonte Maddox can go back to the slot and play that nickel role where he's, more accustomed to, and that's more what he was brought here to do. The defensive line, doesn't have to get after the quarterback as quickly as they would and cause so much havoc because you have a guy back there across from Darius Slay now. So what are your thoughts on the Steven Nelson signing, and can one guy change a core of a secondary?
I like the signing. It's a good value. I guess that's the best way I could describe it. You sign a guy like him early in the free agent process, you're going to have to pay an arm and a leg because teams are so giddy, teams are so aggressive as soon as free agency starts. I guess that's the best way. As far as now is concerned, though, like we're talking about a player whose skill set I like. Like you said, he's a CB2, which is, I mean, at this time of year, especially, that's a reasonable. That's a lot to get this close to trade camp. Like you said, it helps sort of reconfigure the secondary in a way that you feel a lot better about. How well he plays is TBD, right? The Eagles don't allow their corners to. This is not the most friendly system of corners, to say the least, as we've seen over the last couple of years. But I will say this: I very much believe in building your secondary by volume. If there's anything in the NFL right now that you can't have enough of, it's cover corners, right? You can have 5 and still not have enough because obviously injury is a thing. And teams are now using 3 and 4 wide receivers more now than ever before. So I think we can agree that generally speaking, we feel pretty good about the front four. We feel pretty good about the ability to rush the passer of the team. But the secondary has been the bugaboo over the years. You can build an excellent front seven. It doesn't matter. Like we've lost games solely because of the secondary in years past. So I like the signing. I think it goes a long way in improving the defensive line, but it also sort of straightens out the secondary, like you said. So all in all, a good value signing, not the kind of sign, you're not bringing in Jalen Ramsey, right? So he's not a difference maker, but what he is a solidifier. And at this time of year, you'll take 100 of those guys. So to plug him into the secondary, again, a position where I believe quantity over quality, generally speaking, and this guy can play a little bit. So I give Howie a thumbs up on this one.
I do too, man. And just to follow up, I haven't found myself giving Howie Roseman much credit over the last year or two. But I feel like he's having a sneaky good offseason. He adds some pieces on defense in Anthony Harris and Eric Wilson from Minnesota. He adds a veteran presence on the line and an edge rusher in Ryan Kerrigan. Now Steven Nelson. He goes up to 10 back in April and goes and gets his man in Devontae Smith. How would you rate Howie's offseason so far?
More favorably than I would have expected coming into this thing. The thing the Eagles are dealing with right now, of course, is the fact that they're paying Carson Wentz $34 million to play quarterback for the Colts. They got nearly $50 million in dead money on the book. So it takes a really shrewd general manager to improve the team at all, even on paper, during the offseason, in which that's the reality. Candidly, I don't see much of a way that this team can be a playoff contender this season merely because of that. There's almost no context in recent football history in which a team with that much dead money has almost any chance of success in a cap-driven league. It's almost impossible. So what Howie did is he hung out in the bushes and he plucked guys where he could. That's really the only option that he had. So all things considered, I think he did okay. Ultimately, his offseason is going to be judged by the Devontae Smith pick. Because these free agents that he found or sort of minor trades that he made in the margins, those things are done by every NFL general manager, and all these guys, that's their job. It's their responsibility to find ways to improve their team along the edges. But ultimately, this is a team that's not had a number one wide receiver in years. They traded back and then traded back up to get the kid. So in my judgment, the Devontae Smith pick is going to far and away be the single biggest determinant in how we judge this offseason. And this is probably his most critical offseason since the one in which he drafted Carson Wentz and hired Doug Peterson. So that, to me, is the overwhelmingly biggest story for the Eagles this offseason. Is this kid going to be a 1? If this kid's a 1, then I think it's a success. If he winds up busting, I think that's how we will remember this offseason. And the Steven Nelsons and Ryan Kerrigans of the world are going to be easily forgotten because, that's just football. Football is that kind of way, man. You build a roster, you got 100 guys in mind. It's going to be whether or not the top end guys, hit. And in the case of this offseason, that's Devontae Smith. So that's the guy whose name I have circled.
It's interesting you say that, though, because I completely agree with you. But when I looked at the Devontae Smith pick, the reason I wanted Howie to go up and get him or get a guy of that caliber, the Heisman Trophy winner, is it's a lose-lose in that standpoint. You're not trying to be the smartest guy in the room. Everyone, at least 90% of this fan base, wanted a Devontae Smith, a Jamar Chase, a Jalen Waddle, right? So if he doesn't hit, it pushes your timeline back probably. But I don't think from a fan base perspective, people are going to be too up in arms. I think they're just going to be more disappointed over the fact that Devontae Smith was a bust rather than the Howie selection. But I agree with you, man. Just one more thing, a potential offseason move. Who knows when it's coming in? Before we went live here, I just saw a Twitter article about the off the field allegations for Deshaun Watson. But as far as headlines go in the NFL, Aaron Rodgers probably holds the most attention right now, and he could be signing in just a few moments with Green Bay and coming back for a year. But right behind that is probably all the Deshaun Watson stuff, from his legal issues to his trade rumors. And as of late, it seems like, at least in the Philly area, the Eagles seem to be in the middle of it all. Do you want to trade for Deshaun Watson? Put the legal stuff aside. I know that's really hard to do because we're talking about giving up 3 to 4 first-round draft picks. But I ask you that from a football perspective because I know you're a Jalen Hurts guy. I know my guy JD is a Jalen Hurts guy. I'm TBD on Jalen Hurts. But I've seen far too many people on Twitter and on social media. I know it's not the smartest place in the world, but just say that they don't want to trade for Deshaun Watson because they believe in Jalen Hurts and they want this 1 year to see if Jalen Hurts is the guy. And that just boggles my mind when I'm talking from football perspective, that you would not want a 25-year-old Deshaun Watson who's a proven top 5 quarterback in this league and would catapult you to contention right now.
Yeah, I'm on your side on this one. I would not allow this Jalen Hurts trial year, if you will, to get in the way of acquiring Deshaun Watson. Like you said, the off-the-field stuff's sensitive. You feel bad almost like looping in the football with it because it's not. It makes me feel like it's like I'm doing something improperly. But this is a sports show, and we'll talk about sports. My opinion is the same as yours and the same as most reasonable people. I like Jalen Hurts. Period. New paragraph. I love Deshaun Watson as a football player, and if there is any reasonable chance that the Eagles can acquire him, and I have good reason to believe they have more equity or more capital than any team in the league that wants to, then I would be all in favor of doing it. Now, when he plays next is TBD. What that looks like is TBD, and obviously he has all the legal issues that still need to be sorted out. And best I can tell, there is no there's no concrete timeline as to when that might happen. So
No.
Deshaun Watson's people think he's going to get traded before the season. In reality, I don't know how likely that is, because it seems silly for the Texans to trade him while his value is as low as it is, because like you said, this is a top 5 quarterback who's 25 years old under a fairly team-friendly contract by today's standards. He is the most valuable commodity in the league. He will be the best player to ever be traded, in my judgment, when you consider position, age, and quality of player. So, yes, and look, I mean, if there's anything that I've learned from being an Eagles fan for 20 years, is that Jeffrey Lurie is obsessed with the quarterback. Always has been, always will be. And that's because that's what wins in the NFL now, and we know it. So if the Eagles ride with Jalen Hurts this year, I'm good with it, as you know. I like Jalen Hurts. I think they made the right decision on draft night. I think they made the right decision in trading Carson Wentz. But the opportunity to trade for Deshaun Watson is much too strong. And what was the point of acquiring all that capital if not to trade for a top 5 25-year-old quarterback that for the next decade can solidify that position in the best football city in the country? To me, it's a no-brainer.
So let me ask you. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead,
So sorry, I've been so quiet. I've been listening. So my personal opinion on this whole Jalen Hurts thing, I'm kind of in the middle because I'm a big time Clemson fan and I'm also a big time Jalen Hurts fan. I've always pulled for him. The way that the kid handled getting benched at Alabama and then taking his talent to Oklahoma and really doing something, and having to follow up. Was it Baker or Kyler? He had to fire one of the two, and he was just placed in the middle. And he had a really good passing year. I actually have my question for you is, I know that everybody says he's not a great passer, and he hasn't been a great passer. But from me watching a lot of college football, I don't have that same opinion about Jalen Hurts. I thought that when he was at Alabama, I thought he wasn't a great passer. But I think the progression from Alabama to Oklahoma has changed my mind, and I just don't know how we can get more Eagles fans to see it that way.
Yeah, I'm with you on this one, and that's because the data is with you on this one. I saw a player go from being sort of a fringe NFL quarterback at Alabama to being what I had as a first-round talent. He wound up going in the second round. He would not have gotten out of the second round, best I can tell, and that's because he made massive improvements as a passer, both statistically and on film at Oklahoma. That is indisputable. It is also indisputable that he showed a lot of holes as a passer, as a rookie for the Eagles. But if we're going to, provide all these excuses for Carson Wentz why he stunk last year, then the same exact rules apply to Jalen Hurts. In fact, he was in an even worse position when you consider the circumstances. He beat the number 1 defense in the NFL in his first start, and he nearly beat the Washington football team again, which the Eagles were trying to lose, right? So he did not – statistically, he didn't grade all that well. But we know the offense functioned at a much higher level. On a per-play basis, the Eagles were about 20% better when Jalen Hurts played quarterback. In fact, the difference between Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts was about the difference between the Saints offense and the Jets offense last year. He was that kind of good. So here's what I'm saying. Jalen Hurts does not have to be an excellent passer to be an excellent quarterback. He only has to be an average passer to be an excellent quarterback in the NFL because of his ability to run. We're overlooking that in a massive way, in my opinion. What you know is that based upon his skill set, the Eagles are going to have a top 5 run game because you have him, you got Miles Sanders, and you have an outstanding run blocking offensive line. That counts for a lot. So all you really, if Jalen Hurts can be a league average passer, he's going to be more than worth his weight in gold. The question is, can he be that? I'm somewhat skeptical, but I do think that based upon his progression and based upon what we know of him as a person, he's gonna hit a ceiling. He has the aptitude, he has the initiative. So I like the idea of having this year to sort of prove himself. Absolutely, because he's a second-round pick, which means he's very cheap. He has demonstrated that he has the traits. But he's also a guy that completed 40% of his passes against man coverage last year and missed a lot of layups. So there's really no way to evaluate the player until you see him do it for a full year with the same opportunities that every other QB1 is given. But again, not at the expense of Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, so you brought it back to Deshaun Watson. And one thing stuck out to me in your closing comments before was you think he might be the best player to ever be traded given all those, age, talent, all that stuff. Negotiations, this is how negotiations start. They start high, right? But like from one report I saw earlier, someone saying, it's going to be like 5 high draft picks. And then another report was it's going to be 3 first-round draft picks plus, a couple of starters in this league. What do you think a package for him is going to look like? What would you give up if you were Howie Roseman? Would you give up those potentially 3 first-round draft picks this year plus Jalen Hurts, throw in, Zach Ertz or whatever?
Yeah, I trade the 3 runs. Trey Lance went for 3 runs, for God's sake. This is a kid that played 1 year at North Dakota State. So Deshaun Watson is a top 5 quarterback coming off an all-time great season at the age of 24 for a team that surrounding him there in Houston was among the worst we have ever seen. I mean, that team is going 0-16 with a league average quarterback last year. He had an all-time great season. Greeny and I did a monologue after the season was over, and I don't have the when you split how his yards per attempt and its completion percentage and all of the efficiency metrics that we use now. We're talking about it that had an all-time great season, and he did so on a terrible football team. So I don't think I can overstate that. When you consider, though, the off-the-field stuff, I guess what I'm hopeful, if that's even the right way to say it, not to be insensitive, what you're hopeful is that you're not going to have to pay a king's ransom for the player because there's more to it than just what's going on the field. But would I be willing to give up 3 1s plus to get Deshaun Watson? Absolutely. If you project out Deshaun Watson's next 10 years based upon the first 4 of his career, you're talking about a player that might wind up in the Hall of Fame. There is no number of first-round draft picks that I wouldn't trade for Deshaun Watson if I knew that was going to be his trajectory. What would worry me, of course, is the fact that you're going to have to compromise the rest of your roster for a little while in order to get him. But the contract is not such that it's going to hinder you from a salary cap standpoint that significantly. The issue is that you're going to pretty much have to go this whole year without a first-round pick, and it takes a while for teams to catch up to that, which means Howie's going to have to hit in the margins, and that's sort of been a hit or miss thing for him, obviously, since the Super Bowl year.
Yeah, guys, sorry if we just had a glitch. I don't know what happened. JD disappeared. My computer went wonky. But Drew says first Hurts, Zach Ertz, I guess, and a second and a fourth. I don't think that's enough. Scotty, Fletcher Cox, Jalen Hurts, and 3 firsts. Drew, what's up?
That's enough. Like that's the kind of deal that Houston is going to say yes to. The fact that the Eagles have the 3 potential ones in 22 is sort of the golden goose for me. So yes, it would to swing and miss in the first round for a year would stink, but the fact that you only have to do that for 1 year is what makes it so appealing. And I've always been of the opinion that I view draft picks more as assets than I do anything else, because we know what the hit rate is amongst first round picks, and it's less than 50-50. We did that research before the draft this year, which is to say the average first-round pick is not going to sign a second contract with the team that drafts him. These guys are lottery picks. That's why I favor what the Rams are doing right now. The Rams are trading their ones for things that they know, for sure things, for Matthew Stafford, for Jalen Ramsey, etc. That's good business because, yes, though you have to pay those guys top dollar, you know what they are. And what I can do, if I can get those star veteran players while forfeiting my first-round picks, but not losing the quantity, right? Like I'm not trading 10 picks. I'm trading just my top picks. That's what I value most. What I favor is trading high picks for things that I know and taking lots of shots in the draft like it's the lottery, because that's what the draft is anyway. The point of first-round picks, in my opinion, is for the purpose of assets if you have the opportunity to use them as such. Obviously, that was sort of the Sixers' philosophy years ago, and it was sort of hit or miss for them. But if you have if the Eagles have the opportunity to trade for Deshaun Watson and it's those 3 1s plus, they're going to do it. 100% they're going to do it.
So real quick, Dylan, let me jump in here. So I see this one comment under. It's like Drew Evo. He said they won't take that big contract of Cox. I honestly don't think that that's true because they just gave up J.J. Watt, who had a massive contract. They didn't re-sign him, or he went somewhere else. But either way it goes, that money's freed up. They have a lot of money because they got rid of everybody. DeAndre Hopkins is no longer with him. He had a massive contract. I don't know anybody on the Texans who has a big contract outside of Deshaun Watson. So
yeah, the Deshaun Watson contract is the big contract, right? So if they wind up trading Deshaun Watson, that's the cap issue is not going to. Now they might want a younger player, but the contract won't be the issue if it's a player like Cox or a veteran player with a larger deal. My guess though is that they're going to want players to build around on rookie contracts in addition to the draft picks.
That's why I think the Jalen Hurts thing is big, because you got Jalen Hurts who would be at quarterback. He would fill that position. I mean, I know they got 5 other quarterbacks or whatever they got now that they went out and got, but
it's that factory, man.
It's that fact. It's just like they have like 8 quarterbacks. I looked the other day. It's like every quarterback from the ACC is on that team. So
yeah, they have the entire Coastal on their roster. But ultimately, the Texans are at stage 1 of a rebuild, and what teams do at that stage of rebuild is accumulate assets, of which the Eagles have lots of them. Ultimately, I think it's going to come down to the Eagles and the Dolphins. Those are the two teams that have the assets, and the tiebreaker is going to be the fact that the Eagles have the Dolphins' first-round pick from this past year. And if that's what ends up netting the Eagles, Deshaun Watson, I want to hear a lot of people apologize personally to Howie Roseman.
So this is what I can't wrap my mind around, right? Like, so JC Eagles Talk says, I hear you, Hembo, but I think Hurts can be as good as Watson. He just needs playing time and weapons around him. You're banking on Jalen Hurts being a top 5 quarterback in the NFL when, you said it, Hembo, he has the traits to be a good quarterback in this league. But top 5, like I feel like that's unrealistic at this point, given what we've seen. He also, and then my other point was, he won't trade nothing for Watson. I will play Hurts and upgrade the team through the next year. Through the draft, they have 3 first-round picks and a ton of cap, he says here. And while I praised Howie Roseman for this offseason earlier, let's not forget who's making those first-round selections. Yes, I think he made a good selection in 2021. That's been the first good selection he's made in like a decade. So why we get all wrapped up in these 3 first-round picks, and we'll have all this cap and blah blah blah. Howie's still the guy drafting next year. So, yes, I'm throwing them all in. I'm pushing all my chips to the middle of the table for Deshaun Watson. Again, from a strictly football standpoint. My last question on the Eagles, Hembo, is as training camp approaches, like, just what are your expectations for this team heading into the season as currently constructed? Like, put the Watson rumors aside. Jalen Hurts is your QB1. What's your expectations?
I don't think this is a team that can make the playoffs, candidly. I think that even if the Eagles hit their, say, 90th percentile, say they play as good a season as they practically can have, I don't see – again, in football, you have to project things out based upon player health in a reasonable way, right? Because obviously no one would have seen Dak Prescott fracturing his leg last year. That was that for them. So that's just how things go. But the Cowboys and the Washington football team both have considerably more talent than the Eagles. To me, that's just clear as day. The path for the Eagles to have a shot at the playoffs next year is something happening with one of those teams that you just can't predict based upon injury, and Jalen Hurts hitting, right? That's the path there. Here's what I see. I see an offense that's going to have a top 5 run game, but it's probably going to struggle from an efficiency standpoint in the pass game. That's not ideal in today's NFL. I see an offensive line that should be able to play at a top 10 level, and I see a defensive line that should be able to play at a top 10 level. When I blend all that stuff together, I see a team that should win 7 or 8 games. That's if the Eagles, say, hit their 75th percentile, which means I think the Eagles are the 3rd best team in the division behind the 2 teams I mentioned and in front of the Giants. I do think the Eagles are a more talented team than the Giants, and actually kind of an underrated team coming into this season, because what people incorrectly do so often is take the year before and then use that as the baseline, right? And then craft an argument around that. Whereas in football, there are so many more variables than there are constants, and there is no question the Eagles have built this team around their big people, most of whom got hurt last year. So obviously that's so much a part of the story for me. I think that I don't know that Jalen Hurts is going to satisfy us in such a way that we're going to all say at the end of the year, this is our franchise guy. But I would not be surprised if it happens. So I'm going to say the Eagles, as of right now, because the season started tomorrow, I set the under at 7.5, which is a little bit higher than where Vegas has set it. But I think people are sleeping on the quarterback. I think people are sleeping on the fact that the Eagles actually do, from the perspective of just their big people, probably have the best collection in the entire division.
Yep, so I agree with you. I had them at around 8 wins probably. Before all these moves, before the Steven Nelson move, which I absolutely love, the Kerrigan move, I like. Kerryon Johnson, if he can, reinvent himself in Philly 2 years ago, he was really 2-3 years ago, he was really good in Detroit. He's still really young, so we'll see. Jalen Hurts is the big if, and health, as always with this Eagles team and with all teams, is the big if. So we will see. My last point is, yes, how does anybody know? You're correct, Drew. But what is proven is Deshaun Watson is a top 5 quarterback. That's why you do that, not to wait and see what Jalen Hurts can be. That's my opinion. Moving on to the Phillies, Hembo, who are, Dave Dombrowski's kind of said, we are going to be buyers. We are going to, go over that cap threshold possibly. And they've been linked to a lot of names as of late. Craig Kimbrell, Chris Bryant, Byron Buxton, Starling Marte was one. There's a ton out there. There's rumors that they're good, that they're in contention for more starting pitching depth, which they really need. But my question to you is, does an addition or two give them enough to catapult them to, contending? Like, are they one
Yes.
or two? Are they Craig Kimbrell away?
Yes, the Phillies are right now the team. I want to try and say this correctly. The Phillies are the team right now that I would say if there was one team I was betting on, right? If there was a team right now in baseball that people aren't talking about enough, if there's a good sort of long shot to win their division that people are not talking about, if we're to identify one team right now outside the playoff picture that makes it, I'm betting on the Phillies, and I'm not doing that as a fan. I'm doing that as an objective stats guy. And here's what I mean. The Phillies are a 500 club right now. So on paper, and their run differential is about even. So like they're not a team that jumps off the page. But they play the most difficult schedule in all of baseball amongst all teams that are 500 or better. In other words, I think they're at least a couple wins better than their record would indicate. That's one reason to bet on them. The second reason to bet on them is the fact that they have, by a long shot, the easiest schedule remaining in all of baseball. Both of those things matter a lot in evaluating this team down the stretch. And yes, the Mets are 4 games clear of the Phillies, but that's a good week. The Mets we know are going to be all in on a bunch of guys, but the Phillies aren't going to let the Mets, beat them over the head because the Phillies are going to be aggressive, like you said. I very much believe, especially right now, Francisco Lindor is going to be out another month and a half. The Jacob deGrom thing would scare the living crap out of me if I were a Mets fan because the forearm thing, that is very uncertain. That is very tenuous. And without Jacob deGrom, that's a 500 club. They are literally, by the dictionary definition of a 500 team, when Jacob deGrom does not pitch. And there's a chance he doesn't pitch again this season, and there's an even better chance that even when he does, he'll be compromised and he won't be the greatest pitcher any of us have ever seen. So all that to say, I think the Phillies are in a very good position here to buy. Now, what does that look like? I'm not as concerned about the positionally as it sounds like you are. I'm a believer in just aggregating as much talent as possible and trusting the manager to try and make it work. So for me, yes, I think priority number 1 would be a starter. I also think adding a position player would be great to be able to add depth to the lineup because we haven't had the season we expected from Alec Boehm or from Didi Gregorius and from a few others, even Rhys Hoskins to a lesser extent. But ultimately, I'm not as worried about that as I am just making sure that I can capitalize on the fact that this is a buyer's market. So there are 3 teams that I think I'd be, calling endlessly until we could figure something out. The Twins, you mentioned, but I'm also in on Jose Barrios, the starter. Again, that would be my priority number 1. The Royals have Whit Merrifield, a player that's got a lot of position versatility. I can hit him at the top of my lineup. I like this game. And there's also the Rangers, because the Rangers have Joey Gallo and Kyle Gibson and Ian Kennedy. And all 3 of those clubs are going to be selling and have pieces for the Phillies. And again, this is a buyer's market. You're not going to have to trade your number 1 prospect, your number 2 prospect for these kinds of players. That's not how baseball works anymore. So it is incumbent upon Dave Dombrowski now to figure that out, and to figure that out, in my judgment, sooner than later, because the Mets are in a position now with their new ownership that they want to be aggressive. He wants to be able to tweet, look, we got Chris Bryant, look, we got Craig Kimbrell. But that's not good business. What the Phillies can do right now is sort of jump the Mets and put them on their heels in a position where they now have to spend 150 cents on the dollar to be able to appease their fans. I think the Phillies should be operating from a position of strength and to try and act before the Mets do for that very reason.
Let me get your opinion on this because it's going to sound weird when it comes out of my mouth. I'm going to try to phrase it correctly, but when the Phillies, were I don't know how many games under 500 just a few weeks ago, just 2 weeks before the All-Star break, and they very quickly turned that around, winning 4 straight series heading into the break and taking 3 or 4 versus Miami after, and now they are in a position to be buyers. They're 500 club, 4 games out of first place. I was saying it's a disservice when you're in second place to not try to, make a run at a pennant, because baseball, there's a large portion of this fan base that doesn't think the Phillies can contend no matter what. They go get Chris Bryant, Craig Kimbrell, right?
Crazy. That's
and
crazy.
my thing is, I'm not even talking about just the Phillies roster. I'm talking about baseball as a sport. Now, here's how I'll try to phrase this. Baseball, to me, when it gets to October, is a very momentum sport. It's very different to me than basketball or hockey. In basketball and hockey in a 7-game series, the most part, the better team's going to win over the course of a 7-game series. Sometimes there's upset, sometimes there's not. Football's one and done. We know that. Baseball, when you look at the San Francisco Giants or the Boston Red Sox, on paper, the Milwaukee Brewers, should they be 18 games over 500, 30 games over 500? If you put the Phillies and them side by side in a 7-game series, I would like the Phillies odds. So that's my point. When you had these teams that are the Giants have had the best record in baseball all year long, you do yourself a disservice by not going for it, because if you can just make the dance, you have a chance, in my opinion, if you're this Phillies team.
The notion that Phillies can't make a run over the next 2 months is outrageous to me. I understand if you live and die with them every day, you're watching every game, you're seeing the bullpen blow,
Right.
a lead a week, you're seeing, some guys in that lineup not come close to matching the back of their baseball cards. It's a frustrating sport, but that's the nature of baseball. That's not a Phillies problem as much as it's just a baseball problem. Yes, I get it. They're a 500 club right now, but I already provided you the context. They're better than their record indicates. Take my word for it. The question is, how can they beat the Mets by 5 games over the next 2 months? In my opinion, the best bet in order to do that is to be able to add one more frontline starting pitcher. That's what I would prioritize. Again, I'm not getting too hung up on that. I just want to add the most talent that I possibly can. But here's my reasoning for the pitcher. The guy, like my number one option would be Jose Barrios of the Twins. Not only can he shove, but you have next year in which he's under team control. Here's why. If you add Jose Barrios, just using him as our example here, Kyle Gibson, I would say, also applies to a lesser extent. You improve your bullpen naturally because Vince Velasquez was born to pitch in the bullpen, and we finally had the opportunity to see him do that. He would immediately potentially be the Phillies' best reliever once he sort of got his ducks in a row from that standpoint. So that in and of itself, I think, is very important. The second piece of it is you describe baseball as a momentum sport in the playoffs. That's right. The momentum is whoever's starting pitching for you the next day. The Phillies have Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler already. Name a team that you feel good about matching the Phillies blow for blow from that standpoint right now in the National League. I'll take the Phillies, right? If the Phillies are fortunate enough to win the division, they will be going against the Milwaukee Brewers. You mentioned them: Corbin Burns, Brandon Woodruff, Freddie Peralta. Those guys are awesome. But so are our guys. So it's not like the Phillies here are selling out going for broke for a 1-game wild card. They're selling out going for broke for a division which guarantees you a best of 5, in which you could start Aaron Nola, Zach Wheeler, and this guy, right? So this is a sort of kills 3 birds with 1 stone because of the way that it improves your bullpen. Also improves you the last 2 months of the season, and also gives you a better chance to win a playoff series. It's good business to be overly aggressive, I would say, at the time of year. And again, you're not going to have to trade away an absurd amount of capital because that's just not how baseball is anymore. Right now, teams value their prospects more than ever before, and there are more sellers than buyers. So the Phillies are going to find themselves in a position. I'm hopeful that they can add multiple pieces for 75 cents on the dollar, and they're going to pass the Mets sometime in September.
How aggressive, last question for the Phillies, how aggressive do you expect Dombrowski to be? Like, just from a fan standpoint, because, we keep talking about, get another starter, get a bullpen piece. Do you see him making more than 1 move? Will he be making 2, 3 moves, adding 2 bullpen pieces, adding a Jose Barrios? How aggressive do you think he will be?
So I think he's going to be about as aggressive as any general manager in baseball. We know the Mets are going to be all in, and we know the Red Sox are going to be all in. Those are going to be the 2 other buyers that I think are going to be competing with the Phillies for some of the crop types. I think the reason the Phillies are operating at something of a disadvantage is because the Nationals have a lot to offer, and I'm not sure how inclined they're going to be to trade within the division. But, I mean, who would not like to see Max Scherzer start game 3 of the NLDS, or see Daniel Hudson or Brad Hand coming out of the 8th inning, to Hell's Bells or something? That's obviously a great situation too. So my guess is that he's going to be extremely aggressive. Now, how much he actually gets done is another question. But what I would like to see, if I got to pick what happened here, it would be a trade in which he identifies a team that likes whatever collection of young players we have to offer. And again, I'm more than happy to pay some salary because that's it. Again, like you mentioned, they're going to be willing to exceed the luxury tax threshold. That's a competitive advantage for the Phillies. What I'm hoping for is to find a Twins or a Royals or a Rangers where you say, we want 2 or 3 of your guys. We'll give you 4 or 5 of ours, and we'll make that trade happen in a cocoon where you don't have to try and sort of allocate your resources all over the place. I'm hopeful that we can find, and those teams exist. I already outlined them. So that's what I'm most hopeful for. I think what the Phillies will probably wind up doing is adding a back-end starter type and multiple arms in the bullpen. If that's what they do, I think the fan base will be dissatisfied, but I think it has a chance to be enough. But ultimately, I think the Phillies should be big game hunting, for lack of a better term, because I don't view this as a 500 club, and I don't think they view themselves as that either, especially after the Ronald Acuna injury. This is a 2-horse race in the National League East now. It's us and the Mets, and that's it.
I'm with you, man. And something that's kind of shifted gears over the last couple of years, well, just for the first time now, is I agree. I don't have the Eagles as a playoff team right now. I think they can overachieve and potentially win a bad division depending how things play out and if Jalen Hurts can exceed expectations. And I had the Phillies. I think they are a playoff team if they go out and bolster their roster right now. But moving on, the last segment of today's show, probably the most polarizing person in this city, this athlete in this city right now, this team in this city right now. I'll go first, and I know JD has a question he's been throwing out to a lot of people as of late. But I just wanted to get your feel on, we just talked baseball market. What is Ben Simmons' market to you? Because, a few weeks ago, it seemed like it was starting out really good. A first offer of draft capital and Malcolm Brogdon seemed really good as a first offer. And now you're hearing rumors and inklings that, the Sixers haven't talked to Ben Simmons. I don't know how true that is, that they're not getting any of the star type of players that Daryl Morey wants for Ben Simmons. They're getting more role offers. The Kings won't throw in De'Aaron Fox. They want to base around Buddy Hield, blah, blah, blah. What is Hembo's market for Ben Simmons like?
So I think right now the market is suppressed because it can be, because we're not at crunch time yet. Crunch time is Thursday. Crunch time is the draft. That's when the rubber sort of meets the road here. So I'm not surprised that we're not seeing teams offer the best player for Ben Simmons. Like, that's just not how it works. Like, that's not how you even play fantasy basketball. So it's not how teams around the NBA are going to play. I view this emotionally like you guys do too, but I also live in the objective. So I think this is the best way I can describe it. I find it very difficult to imagine a scenario in which Ben Simmons can be in the Sixers starting lineup game 1 of next season, based upon the last time we saw him play. I also think there's a reasonable chance that is best case scenario for the Sixers based upon whatever baseline they feel needs to be met for a Ben Simmons trade. So what we all agree on is that we would trade heaven and earth plus Ben Simmons for Damian Lillard, right? We also agree that we would trade Ben Simmons plus something considerable for Bradley Beal. Most everyone I've talked to thinks that. The question then is, if neither of those options exist, how much are we willing to settle? Because in my opinion, it shouldn't be more than 85 or 90 cents on the dollar, because Ben Simmons is still one of the 10 best defenders in the NBA. He still has a whole host of skills that teams would, in theory, clamoring for if he were a free agent. If he were a free agent,
Right.
He would get a max deal or close to it for sure. So he would be the best player on maybe half a dozen teams in the league, and there are another dozen or so teams that would gladly take him as a second or third option. So the market definitely exists, and there's nothing that NBA GMs like more than a buy low candidate. It's just Daryl Morey's responsibility now not to do that. So I have a whole long list of players that I think the Sixers are probably calling about it, or teams are calling the Sixers about an offering for Ben Simmons. But ultimately, I don't see an obvious reason to trade him for less than a superstar. Here's why. To finish that thought, we saw what happened in Boston the last 2 years by letting imperfect top end talent leave. Kyrie Irving walked. Terry Rozier signed and trade. Gordon Hayward walked. Even though those guys weren't necessarily a perfect fit there, you can't let that kind of talent walk out of the building, because in the NBA, there's such a massive chasm between premium talent and everyone else that you can't reasonably do that to your basketball team. So it's a roundabout way of answering your question. But to me, if it's no on Damian Lillard and no on Bradley Beal, then teams need to get awfully creative to meet my threshold.
Yeah, real quick, JD, I just want to add in, I don't know how you run it back. After what just unfolded in the postseason with Ben again, I don't have an alternative, right? If Damian Lillard or Brad Beal isn't available. However, the only way I move Ben Simmons is if it pushes the Sixers closer to a championship. A Colin Sexton and Kevin Love trade does not push them closer to a championship. A Buddy Hield and Marvin Bagley, the third trade, does not push them closer to a championship. Anything like that does not push you closer to a championship. So I don't know how they run it back, because I think kind of that relationship is very fractured now, especially within this fan base. But like you said, he does everything else at a top tier level, and that's why I've stuck up for him for so long, because people underappreciate that aspect. But yeah, if those two, Levine was one that I had out there, but I don't see Levine being moved. So outside of those three, I don't know what they do. I don't have an alternative answer for everybody, but you can't just sell them for a bag of chips.
No doubt about it. JD, hit me with your question, and then I'll run through my little list here. I just get yes, no from you guys to finish it out.
All right.
Okay. So mine was actually a two-parter. So just listen to the first part before because if the first part is really wild, okay? I just want you to know.
Right.
I'm warning you. All right. So the first part is how everybody has been saying, here in Philly media and outside have been saying Ben Simmons he can't do it. He can't be the man. But he's 25 years old. So I don't know anybody that was their full form at 25 Even if we look at Jordan at 25, he wasn't Jordan the killer. So we're looking at 25, but then we look over across the hallway and there is Embiid. And Embiid is a little older. He's had a couple more significant injuries. So are we doing things that are pro Embiid's window, or should we be doing things that are pro, okay, he's a young player that we can work with, that we have a little bit more time, because he's 25 and he's 16 and he's a point guard basically?
That's an outstanding question. And the reason why is the Joel Embiid factor here, I think, really drives everything. It is my opinion that the 76ers should be acting as if the objective here is to maximize Joel Embiid's prime, not to extend their window. Like, I would, in theory, love the idea of Darius Garland, but that's costing Joel Embiid years of his prime, and that's only if that kid plays, right? So that's just an example, a young player who I'm in on, but it's another reason why you wouldn't say you make a move with Golden State or Cleveland for that number 3 pick. I mean, Golden State picks 7 and 14. They have Andrew Wiggins. They have James Wiseman. But, like, are you getting closer next year? That's the point. Like, you can't use next year as a trampoline for the future. Next year has to be a year in which you start the season thinking that you have a chance to win a championship. You have a Hall of Fame center in his prime. To address the Ben Simmons age piece of it, I actually disagree with you on that, and here's why. I think what we do, especially for a young player who is as productive and successful early on, is we establish that player as a rookie as our baseline, say, as our floor. And what we do is we assume that player is going to have a traditional upward career arc, sort of the way that many young players do. But in reality, most players have more of most players' careers aren't a perfect trajectory upwards. I mean, that's some guys, like Giannis is a good example of that guy, but it's not everybody. Like, I think we should be living in a world in which there's a reasonable chance that what we've seen from Ben Simmons the last 4 years, which is a guy who's going to average 15, 8, and 8, shoot 55% from the field on layups and putbacks, is who he is, right? I don't necessarily think it's not obvious to me that every player has the kind of aptitude to continually improve their game based upon whatever deficiencies that they have, climax, and then slowly decline. That's not how every player works. It's how some players work, but some players do max out at 22 or 23, like, I don't know, Tyreek Evans or Michael Carter-Williams. Other players don't max out till they're, 30, 32. That happens, with a lot of guys too. So I think using our preconceptions about what a career arc should look like, applying them to Ben Simmons, is incorrect, because I think we have 4 years of data that tell us this is just who Ben Simmons is, take it or leave it.
I agree. Joel Embiid, to me, is this city's best chance at winning a championship in over 2 decades. So you maximize that. And to your point, like, even De'Aaron Fox is one, right, where, he would be great next to Joel Embiid, but he doesn't shoot the 3 ball that well. He's still really young. Is De'Aaron Fox ready in the next year or two to help lead with Joel Embiid to win a championship? I don't know if that's true. That's why, to me, it's got to be one of those guys who is ready within the next year or two.
I got a list here. Can I just want you to know, you guys, and then I'll let you go. You guys I assume you guys are both yeses on whatever it takes to get Damian Lillard.
I am. He's not. He's watching too much USA basketball.
No, I'm not. Can I put it out here real quick? Can I say it real quick? The reason that I'm not okay and just sold on just paying whatever for Dame is because that still doesn't make us. If we have to give away too much, we're still no better than we were before. You're a little better, but he can't play the whole game. Like, he's got to come out. So if we're giving up the lead that they build every game, we'll be no better than we were this year. We could get a lead on you. We just couldn't keep it.
I think it's just so hard to find superstar talent in the NBA that if they can find a way to get him, pair him with Embiid, you just have to trust the front office to be able to find value in the margins on the bench and, with your 3rd, 4th, and 5th starters. Like, to me, it's much harder to land or to obtain a Damian Lillard than it is to fill out the rest of your roster around 2 superstars already. So I do think it's a very reasonable point that doesn't suffer some on defense. But that's a risk I'm willing to take. Bradley Beal, yes or no?
Yes. JD just doesn't want to move Ben. I'm telling you.
No, I don't mind moving Ben. I just don't. I'm not a big Beal fan. I'm just not. He's shooting 50 times and he's only having 40 points.
He's not the most efficient player in the world, but I think in terms of how it would look next to Joel Embiid. Right. So I think you can dream on that. I'm gonna run through a couple other players here, and at the very end, I want you guys to let me know of anybody that really stands out. So obviously we've heard CJ McCollum, we've heard Darius Garland, we've heard Andrew Wiggins in a collection of picks, we've heard Zach LaVine, like you mentioned. Michael Porter Jr. is an intriguing guy to me. Buddy Hield is someone you have to package with. I've heard Derek White and DeJounte Murray. I've heard Kuzma plus KCP. It's pretty yucky. I've heard Porzingis, and I've heard Gordon Hayward. Okay, so that's a lot of names I just tossed at you. But before I let you go, any of those guys in any semblance of package work for you in a trade for Ben Simmons?
Yes.
Who's that?
I have two. Because I only heard two. The Porter, because he's super young and he can score. He can shoot the ball. And he's like 6'10" or something. Yeah. And maybe Devontae Murray, depending on what they gave him.
Listen.
How about you?
No, because it doesn't fit the time. Like Michael Porter Jr. is still so young that I need someone that can go with Joel Embiid right now and help contend and lead for a championship. Damian Lillard, Bradley Beal is one of those two. Zach LaVine fits that mold probably as well. Outside of that, no. And none of those guys even, I don't think, are good enough to lead a package for Ben Simmons. I know Ben Simmons' value is at an all-time low right now after the Atlanta series, but, you still have to get, what he's worth back.
So I know that was a very underwhelming list, and I'm seeing some of the comments that describe it. And here would be the last point that I'd make. This is the collection of players that you're going to hear in Ben Simmons trade rumors. And the reason for it is because Ben Simmons has sabotaged his own value. So while in our minds, having watched him play for so long and having elevated him in our own minds, it's very fair and reasonable to say, I wouldn't trade him 1-for-1 for Michael Porter Jr. Are you kidding me? In reality, the Nuggets wouldn't do that. In reality, the Bulls wouldn't trade Zach LaVine for Ben Simmons because that's the bed we've made for ourselves. So again, you have two options here. In all likelihood, you're going to trade Ben Simmons for 80 cents on the dollar, or you're going to have to stomach it when when Joel Embiid takes the opening tip in game one, kicks it back to Ben Simmons, and he starts running the offense. I mean, to me, those are the two likeliest options. My hope is that if the Sixers can find a way to sign a trade for Kyle Lowry, maybe you have half a year to see if that can work with Ben Simmons and see if maybe there's sort of that dynamic improves the game of everyone across the board and maybe quell some of the issues that you have with Ben. I'm a big fan of Lowry and Chris Paul, but I don't think he's coming here. But that's sort of like, to me, if you're keeping Ben, you got to find something. You got to find
right.
something
moving Ben kind of to more of a like a Draymond Green type of role, not having to be.
Ben Simmons is not a point guard.
Right. And I used to argue that he is, and it's just I've kind of hit that wall. I can't do it anymore. I can't defend it anymore offensively. But my last question for you before you get you out of here is, we just talked about, you just said about bringing him back potentially. Is that something you can see happening because his value is so low right now, an all-time low, where Daryl Morey brings him back, the Sixers start out hot, he looks good, rejuvenated, and then he tries to move him throughout the regular season when he builds up his value?
Yeah, I think it is just as likely that Ben Simmons is back next year at the beginning of the season as it is he's traded in the next, whatever it is, week or several months. I think it is solely based upon the return. Daryl Morey is a brilliant general manager who's going to go in the Hall of Fame someday. He's not trading an asset of Ben Simmons' caliber for much less than 100 cents on the dollar. He's not going to do it, nor should he do it. I understand that we're all frustrated. I understand that we find it very difficult to run it back. He ranked dead last among qualifiers in the playoffs in points per touch. He has made 5 shots in his entire playoff career outside of 10 feet. Like we know all the stats, right? We know the areas in which he is deficient. But there are a lot of players in the NBA. We just saw Giannis win a championship, right? Giannis is a dreadful shooter. Dreadful, right? So if the point is, can the Sixers player development staff if he does run it back with us, can the Sixers player development staff get him in a position where we can mask his deficiencies and play up to his strengths? Because in my judgment, he is a power forward who should be running your fast break and should be relegated to a lot more cutting and screening on offense than he has been. I think the Sixers have misused him, and you can't play 4-on-5 in the NBA in 2021 and win basketball games. In my opinion, if I were a betting man, I would say he is traded, but I think that's only like 60-40.
All right. The great Paul Hembekides, a.k.a. Hembo from ESPN's Get Up, everybody. Please give him a follow if you haven't already on Twitter, at Paul Hembo. Hembo, thank you so much for taking the 50 minutes that you did to come on and spend and talk Philly sports with us, man. Thank you.
You got it, guys. Can I ask you one trivia question before I roll?
Yeah, go ahead. I don't know. This is JD's area. Go ahead.
I just had a quick epiphany. This note I looked up earlier. Who was the last Eagles player? What's the best way to ask this question? Because I make sure that I have the qualifiers right. Who was the last wide receiver that the Eagles have had that has generated 1,000 receiving yards in a season?
Ooh, last
wide receiver.
I don't want to go too early. I don't want to go too late.
Yeah, I want to say Jeremy Maclin, but I don't know.
Yes, I think it's Jeremy Maclin.
Is it Jeremy Maclin?
It's Maclin.
We're going with Jeremy Maclin?
Yeah, right, I'm going to go with it.
You guys want sneaky Hembo time today because Jeremy Maclin is the last Eagles wide receiver to
Let's
go for 1,000 yards in
go!
a season. It was 2014. I was still in college, and that's a long man. My gosh, they just stink at that, don't they? My gosh,
Well,
they just stink at that.
Let's hope that Devontae Smith can be that next Eagles receiver. Hembo, thank you so much, man, and have a nice night.
Later, boys.
Thank you.
Awesome stuff from the great Paul Hembekides from ESPN's Get Up, everybody. JD, before we wrap up here, is there anything that stuck out to you just listening through that interview that he said that you want to get off your chest?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it's not even bad stuff. It's just like he kind of educated me on something. And it's kind of something that we got a lot of. So I'm going to put up Matt's comment. So great Matt McGinty, our boy, says MPJ, but need a lot more. And I hadn't even thought about Michael Porter Jr. because I didn't think they would be trying to move him. But in the case of them possibly getting a Ben Simmons on their end, it could be something that could happen only because Michael Porter Jr. has also been injured when he first got here, kind of similar to Ben Simmons when he first got to the NBA. He shoots really, really well, though. And if you could think about pairing him with Curry and possibly still having Tobias Harris, you could have a kind of a bigger shooting set. And that's where the NBA is going. I'm not opposed to getting rid of him for that, as long as you give me a little bit more with it. And I'm not sure how much.
To his point, I agree with you again. I'm not doing that move. But to his point, with Ben's value league wide right now, he's saying Denver probably ain't doing that one-on-one right for what Ben is right now. So
right.
It's really interesting. But guys, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of the Phaithful Phanatics. We will not be live tomorrow. I'll be down at the Phillies game at Citizens Bank Park. But I'll be back on Wednesday talking Flyers, the busy week that the Flyers have had trade-wise and, future moves that they can get, more Phillies talk. And Eagles training camp will be starting. Players report Wednesday, or I think first practice is Wednesday. Right. So Eagles training camp will be back in action as the Phaithful Phanatics return as well. For myself, for JD, guys, give him a follow at JD_Oracle_DDS. Give DSM Media a follow on Twitter at DSM_Media. And you give myself a follow on Twitter at DylanJD98. Thank you so much and have a nice night.